Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5. In episode 5 I'm going to show you what progress we've made. I don't have any of this screwed down yet, I've just got it in place, and I'll show you what's behind here, but this is just a recap of what it looks like at the moment. And you can see it's coming together really nice, and there's our top covers in place. Of course nothing's screwed down, like I said. You'll see this big mass of wires coming out of the back. That's going to be my power supply, which we'll talk about shortly. These wires here also are part of the power supply, and you'll notice here in the transformer that I repaired, I put a penny in there, and remember I filled this up with epoxy just to keep the moisture out. So I've got a nice penny in there from 2014. It's in there forever, and we're getting ready to connect the tuning caps, get all that in place. So let me remove this stuff so I don't damage it and chip it, and I'll show you where we are. Okay, I'm not sure how much of this you could see, but here's our wires that are coming up, and these go to our power switch and our dial light, I believe. No, I'm sorry, this is just the power switch right here, and these wires that come up here go to the dial light and the on-off, volume control. And I've got those right here, and I'm going to need to figure out what I'm going to do with this power switch. I'm going to replace it, of course. And our volume pot, I've tested it, it works, just needs to be cleaned. So that's that. Let me flip this thing over and show you what I've done on the bottom. One thing I want to note here is when I took this radio apart, there's a switch here. It's a toggle, basically. There were no wires connected to it. So I assume that this is a tone control. I have to look at the schematic and see if I can figure out where it's connected. We'll see. I'll reattach it. I don't know why someone disconnected it at some point, but they did. So let me show the back here. Okay, here's the underside. First thing you're going to notice is I've got caps in here, and you're going to say, well, why didn't you use the sardine cans? So here's one of the sardine cans. They've got these things soldered shut, and you know what? Is it really worth it to do that? I don't know. I'll keep them in the radio. I'll actually keep them inside that battery case that I built, so they're original. But I'm not going to start melting all these things and digging in there and all that stuff. Not for this radio. These components will work just fine. They're neatly mounted. We'll maintain the originality here with these parts. I'm not going to throw them out. But this is what we're going to use with the radio. You'll also see that I ended up having to do a significant rewire here because most of the wires that were in here, first of all, are really stiff and brittle. And in order to connect the coils and everything that need to get back together and these capacitors, I had to replace the wires anyway. So there's very little original wire in here, which is a good thing. I've got a few pieces right over here which I'll address as well. If I don't need to change it, I'm not going to. But there's some really good stuff in here now. And you'll see that the power supply, this is mostly our B+, is starting to get together as a nice bundle. And we'll put some Molex connectors on this so it can be detached from the power supply. And this is our C+ connections right here. So this is what we're going to use for that circuit. And again, I'm going to have all of that coming out the hole here in the radio. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the power supply, what I'm going to do next. But I wanted you to see what we're doing under here. So let's talk about the power supply. So as you recall, we built our B+ power supply on this prototype board. And really what's left for me to do now is to rebuild it on something much smaller. I don't need a board this big. And I'm going to have that done. Then I have to build the C supply, and I'll show you a diagram of what that looks like. Matter of fact, let me put that up on the screen right now. Okay, so there's the C+ supply. And then for the A supply, which is the filament voltage, that calls for 5 volts. I was going to build a power supply, and I would have had to use a transformer and a whole bit, and it would have probably cost me about 25 bucks. I found this on Amazon. 13 bucks. It's a 5-volt power supply. Here's your AC lines, ground. There's your negative and your positive side, and I can adjust it. So that'll give me the 5 volts, and it's I'm not going to say reliable because it's made in China, but it will suit the need. So where am I going to put all this stuff? I'll show you. So because this radio cabinet has a shelf for the batteries underneath the radio, I'm going to use this conduit box right here. All right, and you'll see it's got plugs in here that I can take out, knock out for connections, and it's got a nice cover, like so. Screws down, and this is what we're going to use to power the radio. And you'll see once I figure out how to mount all this stuff, this is the A plus. The B plus will end up in here somewhere on a smaller board, and then I'll be able to put the C plus in here. C plus is a really small board, so I don't need a lot. So everything's going to fit in here nicely. I'll be able to use a common power rail for all this stuff. So, and then basically I'll have wires coming out with a Molex connector that will mate to the other end of the radio, and we'll be in good shape. So this is how we're going to solve the power supply on this thing. I know this box is a little overkill, but this is what we're going to use. In the top here, we're going to have a light to indicate it's got power. That's important. And I'm probably also going to put a light for 5 volt, a diode in there, an LED, so that you can see that the 5 volts is working, just visually, without having to open this thing up. And I'm also going to have to put some ventilation in here as well. There's holes here I can just knock out, so we're good. So I think that's all we're going to do. I was going to put an LED indicator for all the voltages, but that just would require way too much work in order to knock down, for example, 180 volts DC to 5 volts. I don't know about that. That would just generate more heat than we need. So, here's how we're going to handle the power supply. So my project for today is to rebuild the B plus in a smaller footprint, and then build the C plus supply. And then that radio that I showed you, once I connect the power switch and the volume, I'm ready to test, honestly. But we're not going to get to that in this video, and maybe not in the next one. We have to see how well we advance here. So the main key for the power supply is isolation. I want to keep the supplies isolated from each other. Think about how a battery radio works. It's 3 separate sources, right? A, B, and C. They're not connected to each other. So I'm going to make sure I do the same thing here and keep this true to the design of the radio. Alright, so that's what we're doing from a power supply perspective. So let me show you one more thing, and then we'll probably end up wrapping this video. It's not going to be a very long one today, but just want to show you where we are there. Be right back. Okay, and here's what I want to show you. So the tubes on this thing, I still haven't tested them. That's going to be the next thing I do, is put them in the tube tester. But this tube right here, which is it's a 71, I guess. Yep, that's what it is. Look at the bottom of it. There's no solder on the pins. Like, what's up with that? So I don't know if this ever worked. I don't know if someone just popped in tubes. I just don't know. I just don't see any solder here. I mean, here's what a good tube looks like, right? Everything's closed. This one's got holes. That can't be a good thing. So I'm going to flow some solder in there before I test it, and see what it looks like. The other tubes are just fine. Some of these tubes are pretty rare, right? Battery set tubes. Like these 22s, I believe, are fairly rare. And these tube covers are in great shape. I'm going to leave those colors on there. I may have to touch it up with some paint. And this is another 22. There's 3 22s in this set. A little bit of rust here. And you'll see here's another one where the... let me see if I can get a focus on here. Here's another one where the solder's missing. So I'm not sure what that's all about. I don't know if just as heat and stuff affects these things. I just don't know if it collapsed the solder. So I'm going to have to touch all those tubes out before I try to use them. In this one here, there's no holes, but you can see the solder is collapsed. So I suspect that the heat over the years just collapsed the solder, which is never a good thing. So I wanted to share that. Here's the dial light. I'm going to have to reinstall that in the front, put new wires on here. And that's going to be kind of what we do now going forward. So I'm going to clean up these tube shields, clean up these tubes, put them in the tester, make sure they're good, rewire our volume control right here, and then come up with a solution for our power right here. So that's going to be what we're going to do. We're going to use a new toggle switch. Obviously not going to use this, but it'll look real nice. It's got one of them wood switches. I love that. Anyway, the only other thing I didn't show you here are these copper bands. These are the copper bands that are used for the tuning caps, and you'll see that they are heavily, heavily tarnished. So I'm going to need to clean these gently. You never want to break these. Once you break these, you're screwed. So we're going to clean these up and shine them up, and maybe put a coat of clear coat on them so they don't oxidize so easily. So that's going to be something we have to do as well. So that's the update on the old radio here. We're plugging along, and I'm gonna, in the next video, I hope to focus on the power supply and showing you where we are. Not sure if it'll be tomorrow. If not, it'll have to be next weekend. I got a busy week coming up. So, all right, everybody. Hope everybody's well, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.